So sorry I'm starting this broadcast late. It's been such a very, very busy day. How have you guys been? Um, my day has been hectic, very, very hectic. But one thing with me is that once I give my word on something, as much as possible, try to keep it. I would have almost cancelled the broadcast today, but I just said to myself, you know what? I promised I was going to talk about children mental health. So this week is a week where nationally, and when I say nationally, it's actually particularly just in the UK that we are marking Children's Mental Health Week. So about 4 years ago, actually, an organization called Place to Be. Hi Tola, hi SA, nice to see you. Nice to see you. Log in and say thank you, Tolani. Thanks for logging in. So about 4 years ago, actually, an organization called Place to Be started a campaign about the need to raise awareness on mental health for young people. And that's because I think what they did was quite noble, because the truth is, for a very long time, mental health for young people has not always been a topic. People don't like to talk about it because we all just assume that, you know what, kids would always be kids. They would whatever thing they manifesting at the moment, they will get over it, they will get out of it. It's not worth it giving too much attention to children. But guess what? In the last 6 7 years, there's been significant issues around children and their mental health. um, for what did not used to be, and when I say what did not used to be, is that previously most psychiatrists were very cautious around giving diagnoses of mental illness to anyone who was under 21, under 18. They'll be cautious because they'll think the brain is still forming. It may be signs, it may be a mixture of maybe the adolescent moods and all of that. But what we have discovered, or what psychiatrists have discovered, and I'm not a psychiatrist, I always give that caveat out. I'm a mental health advocate, very passionate about raising awareness on mental health issues in the Black, Asian, and minority ethnic community. I'm very passionate to just talk about it. It's an area where for a long time most of us don't like to talk about. I feel that it's something that we should not shy away from. We need to talk about mental health issues. What's the cost? What are the things we should avoid? Where are the services in our community? How can we support one another? So it's actually kind of fourfold. So it's about what are the various type of mental illnesses that we have? What's the cause? As in, what are the triggers in the community? What are the triggers in family life? And what are the things to avoid? And of course, where are the services in the community, which is very, very key. And also, it's good for people to just know what the signs are. What are the early warning signs? How do you know if a person is showing signs that would warrant you supporting them to go and see a doctor? In fact, it's not just about other people. How do you know for yourself? If you are, if you have signs of depression or bipolar, how do you know? So that's basically what I have been driving myself, or have been driven to do in our community in the past 3 years. Actually, going to 4 years now. It will be 4 years in the next few weeks. So this week we are observing children and mental health. Actually, I'd like this to be a conversation, so it's not just me talking to you. If you have any questions, please ask those questions. Let's talk about it. One of the posters that I put up on air, well, when I say on air, I keep saying on air, online. One of the posters that I put up is asking if people are aware that childhood trauma can actually affect us in later life. One of the things that I have found out personally is that in our culture, especially the ethnic minority culture, we usually do not like to talk or deal with issues around trauma. So let me tell you about some of the things. Some of you might even know, to be honest, some of the things that may be deemed as traumatic. So A child witnesses a death of a relative, a mother, an aunt, a sibling, a child witnessing a very terrible accident scene, a child witnessing, you know, failing in a particular key exam in their life. There are all types of things that can cause trauma. And I would just like to ask from those who are watching, what are the kind of things that we think, causes trauma? What causes trauma? And personally, for me, I know one of the things I mentioned was that I was going to talk about my story. I will. I definitely will talk about my story. But I'd like to hear from you, those who are watching online. What are the kind of things that can cause trauma? Um, Trauma is in various ways, and unfortunately, when people go through traumatic um, events or incidents in life, a lot of us do not really deal with it. A lot of us sometimes just kind of sweep it under the carpet and will feel that, you know what, don't worry, it will pass. And there's just this common phrase that people use a lot, that time is the best healer. Time would heal. Time would heal. But the truth is, time does not exactly heal an unresolved trauma. Instead, it comes back in later life to bite the adults. And that is why it is important that this is something that we need to talk about. I know that the theme for this year's Children Mental Health Week is actually encouraging. It says the theme is actually healthy inside and out. Healthy inside and out, meaning that, listen, um, our mind is sometimes a function of how we've treated our body. So if you have not um, been healthy physically, the truth is that it can actually affect you emotionally. So if you have not, if you if you, I don't want to use this word, if you're like a potato slouch, you sit in the room, you don't do anything, over time you find out that that person's mind is going to be affected, and that's the truth. So this year, Place to Be, which is the name of the organization that started Children Mental Health, this year one of the things that it's encouraged for conversations to take place with your children, with your wards, with your nieces, uncle, younger ones around you, mentees around you, is actually to have that conversation with them about the importance of their body and the link between the body and the mind. It is very much linked together. And what do I mean by that? So the way you feel in your body would actually affect the way your mind feels. And the way our children feel in their body would actually affect the way their mind feels like. So it is really important for us to work with them to recognizing um, what those feelings are, and supporting them to walk through those feelings appropriately. Um, Oftentimes, we as parents or aunties or whatever you are in the community, at least you have somebody who's younger who's looking up to you. Oftentimes, we sometimes don't really listen to them. We don't listen to the younger ones because we kind of assume what their feelings are, which is really wrong. We need to listen to them more. The truth is, um, more and more younger children are being diagnosed with depression, with severe anxiety. And in actual fact, um, it is very sad to say. I know that I read, not that I did not physically know. I read, I think about 4 or 5 weeks ago, a young 9-year-old child who actually he killed himself because he had been bullied. And that wasn't just one. I think around that week, actually, there were about 4 or 5 cases of, one was a 9-year-old, another one was a 12-year-old, that actually took their own life because they'd been bullied or they'd gone through different experiences, and they just felt that, you know what, there's no point hanging around. I just want to end it. I just want to end it. So we have a duty to help and work with our children. We have a duty to work with our children, to helping them getting the right self-esteem. One of the things I posted as well is that do we realize that rejection, when we reject our kids, it actually does have long-term effect on our children. Rejection is not necessarily a positive thing. um, so we need to be careful the kind of words we use for our kids, how we affirm them. I know we come from a culture where children are meant to be seen and not heard. That although we don't say it, but we kind of imply it in the way we relate with them. That children are meant to be seen and not heard. But we need to involve our children more. We need to speak to our children more. We need to engage them more. I'm not going to speak for too long today. I'm actually going to try and say what I need to say, very bullet points, and then we'll definitely have to come back. When I come back, part of what we'll be talking about, I'll actually have another discussant on air that who would share her personal experience as a parent. She'll share her personal experience as a parent. How do you deal with a child who is not exactly talking to you about their feelings? How do you know whether your child has mental health issues that warrant or is high enough, if I can use the word, for you to support that young person to go and see a doctor? How do you know? And these are very extremely difficult things, very, very difficult things. Thank you, Tolani, you're very right. One of the things that can actually trigger or cause childhood trauma is when children experience sexual or physical abuse. And I like the fact that you mentioned physical abuse there, Tolani, because the truth is, when we were growing up, especially a lot of us that grew up in Africa, we were brought up to recognize or to accept corporal punishment. Don't get me wrong, I do not think physical chastisement, when it is reasonable, is wrong. But however, when physical chastisement gets to a stage where um, you're leaving marks on the body of the child, or the child is so traumatized by the experience, then that is an abuse. That is no longer chastisement. That is an abuse. When you beat a child up to an extent that their skin peels off and it is bleeding, or you punish a child up to an extent where they can no longer use their leg because they've stooped down, or those kind of funny punishment they gave us when we were growing up. I remember as a child, I said I was going to tell you my story. I remember as a child that I was one child who was extremely anxious, and more anxious around exercises. Sorry, I said exercises. More anxious around punishment. I so feared punishment that um, some of these things I'm going to share with you, I actually found out where the culmination of several incidents in my life that actually affected my personal mental health. And I'm sure my story is not just, I'm not just the only one. I'm sure there's several other people who would relate to what I'm saying right now. My story was that there were traumas when I was growing up that I experienced that was not dealt with. It wasn't dealt with, it was swept under the carpet. Even when I showed signs of early depression, of course, because my parents, in those days, what do they know? I mean, they felt that, you just have to deal with it. Just go on. Get on with it. Just get on with it. Just get on with life. But the truth is, you cannot just get on with life, because if you do not deal with it, it comes back in future to deal with you. And that's exactly what happened to me. I lost my mother. My mother died at a very young age. I was 11. Yes, I was 11 in Form 2 when my mother died. Out of all of my 6 siblings, I think I was the most traumatized, because I was the one that was with her the night before she died. And talking about it now actually does bring a lot of flashback to me. It's something that I have not often spoken about with my immediate family. It was something that I absolutely kept quiet about. Absolutely kept quiet about. Um, Extremely traumatic. My mother actually died during childbirth. Some of these stories, I'm not going to go into details. I'm actually writing a book at the moment, and Um, it's going to be, some of my story will be in the book. And the main reason why I'm talking about it is not just to flesh out my life, because most people who know me know that I'm an extremely private person. If I'm talking about it now, it's bringing some kind of anxiety. But I know it's something that I need to share so that people can learn from my experience, so that we would not make the same mistake with our children. When there's death, when there's separation in the family, we need to talk to our kids to help them through. It is really, really important. One of the great things that Tolani has just mentioned now is that one of the things that can actually trigger mental illness in children is neglect. So we've talked about physical abuse, neglect, sexual abuse is one. So believe you me, as open as we think we are now, that a lot of people are speaking and a lot of people are open and all of that. Um, Sexual abuse is one area where a lot of us have, as adults, we don't like to talk about it. We don't want to talk about the fact that there were some few incidents when we were growing up that we know was inappropriate. Um, it is the wrong touch from one uncle who came to the house. And let me try and lay a balance to this. When we talk about sexual abuse, the common notion is that it is usually girls that get sexually abused when they're young. I would like to say no, it's not just girls that get abused. I am very much aware, and I have discussed with some friends who are male, and they've been abused by their aunties. And one of the most common ones is where boys have been abused by their house help, especially those who grew up in Africa. Abused by their house helps. In fact, some of them, their first sexual encounter was usually with house helps or with one very favorite auntie who used to hang around the house. And these things actually run deep, deep, deep down. It runs deep down into the marrow. And it comes to play later in future. The truth is, if you experience abuse, sexual abuse when you were growing up, please talk about it, don't keep quiet. Because whether you want to acknowledge it or not, the truth is it will show up in other areas in your life. It is statistically proven, so it's not just a matter of, oh, maybe one person. These are empirical studies that have been done. That a lot of people who went through unresolved trauma when they were young, they actually end up growing up to be adults who are extremely distrustful. They are usually very, very angry people. They find it very difficult to stay in loving relationships because they cannot even create the loving relationship. Um, they find it very, very difficult to be consistent, sometimes with their work. You find that sometimes people who've gone through unresolved trauma when they're young, they actually are people who have you know very deep, quick anger. People who just flip like that, deep, quick anger. People who have gone through whether physical, sexual abuse, but let me just kind of categorize all and just call them trauma. People who have gone through traumatic experience in their lives, and those traumatic experiences have not been explored, they've not been spoken through, they've not sat down with probably a psychologist or someone just to unburden, just to speak out, to get out that negative emotion out from them. It comes to play later in life, and we need to be very, very conscious of the memories that we create for our children. But peradventure, like me, like I mentioned earlier, peradventure, you've gone through those horrible experiences already, and you're here as an adult, and you're wondering, how come I'm finding it so difficult to stay in a relationship? How come I don't have any friends? How come I'm finding it very, very difficult to keep friends? How come I'm so paranoid? How come I have problems or issues with trust? Which a lot of adults, I notice that a lot of adults actually have issues and problems with trust. How come? There may be. You may need to sit down with, you may need to sit down with a professional or sit down with a friend, but make sure it's something that you're ready for. Because sometimes when you talk about those emotions, it actually brings up quite a lot of other emotions that scare you. For me, when I went through mine, it was actually an off the cuff conversation I had with my aunt. This was almost over 20 years after my mom died that I realized that I had unresolved trauma, that I realized that the time I went through the blip in my mental health was because of issues that had happened when I was young that was not dealt with. My mother's death and the circumstances around my mother's death shook me to the very, very, very deep marrow. One of the things that hi Shade, thank you for thank you for watching, thank you so much. um yeah, thank you, Paul, for what you've written. Yes, thank you. We should be careful on the words we use on our children. Absolutely. We need to be careful because words are powerful. They actually form emotions. They form a lot of things. We need to be very, very careful. Very, very careful. Hi, Ruthie. Thanks for tuning in. Oh, Nemo, you said I should go and rest well. I promised I was going to do this. I'm going to do this. Of course, I probably will do another one tomorrow. But it's just essential for me to fulfill my promise because I know that it's a topic that a lot of people don't talk about. We don't want to talk about it, but you know what? We do need to talk about it. So I'm going to open the can of worm, if you want to use the word. I'm going to open the can of worm to start this conversation. Shade, you're very right. Rejection is not a positive thing for anyone, child or adult. Absolutely. But you know what? With children, it is more dangerous. With an adult has formed their character already. They can get over it, especially if they build themselves up to be emotionally resilient. For a child, it is worse. Because for a child, they have emotions that they're not trained and they don't even know how to deal with it. So it hangs around and it flips up in different areas of their lives. So, for example, one of the major things that is being spoken about for those who are in UK is the crime and the gang violence that we have in our community at the moment. I know I do not have any empirical study. I don't have access to any statistics that has been done about the number of kids or the type of homes that children who are in gangs, the type of homes they come from. I'm aware that some of the kids who are in gangs actually come from homes where they have two parents. So the mother is there, the father is there. It appears to be a loving home. The truth is, rejection comes in various forms. Rejection might not just be the typical thing of saying, "No, I don't love my child," or "I'm not giving my child that." Rejection comes in various ways. It comes in different ways, and we need to be careful of how the type of words we use when we're saying no to our children. We need to be very, very careful. How do we say no to them? Because unfortunately for us, if I can use the word, the children that we're bringing up these days, they're not as emotionally resilient as we were when we were growing up. We were able to withstand a lot of things. I remember when I was growing up, I was bullied in school. Proper bullied because I was a very thin child, very thin. And I was quite gawky as well, goofy. And I know some of my schoolmates in secondary school then said a lot of inappropriate and a lot of wrong words to me that still rings, or well, it rang for a while. I've dealt with it now. I thank God that I've been able to deal with it. However, we need to be careful of words that we speak to our kids. So, Nemo, yes, you're very right. It's about integrating the cultural ways and understanding that they are growing in two different cultures. You know what, Nemo? Some parents themselves are still struggling with coping with the culture they're coming from and the culture they're here. So you find a lot of parents confused, bringing up children who are confused. That's the truth. And that's why we have one of the issues, if I can use the word, and that's why the gang issues is more predominant in the migrant community, in the ethnic minority community. And I use the word migrant community because um, it's a community where they've not integrated well. They've not integrated well into the UK, into the UK's culture. They've not integrated well, and these are things that we need. These are things that we need to be conscious of. Domestic violence, domestic abuse is also traumatic for children. Absolutely. Very, very traumatic for children when children observe not just the violence, because a lot of the time when we use the word domestic violence, we think it's only when, somebody has physically been violent to somebody. So that's why I know the Home Office actually has advised that the word to be used or the way to capture it is actually domestic abuse and not domestic violence. It's about domestic abuse. So when a father or when a child observes a father run down the mother every single day, or the mother is verbally abusing the father every single day, and the child has to run to the room and close the ears and all of that, there is a secondary impact on the life of those children. And we as parents, we need to be very, very careful. Very, very careful. Not just parents, as adults. So, what are the kind of language or the kind of words you say around you when your children are around? Those are the things that we need to be very, very careful about and make sure that we're speaking the right word to them. I'm going to, as much as possible, put some other updates on the news page. So if you follow us on news page, please, just stay tuned, if I can use the word, and list some of the things, some of the key things. Yesterday we put up some pointers on what are the signs that you can look out for, just for you to know whether your child has issues or not. Because the truth is, the earlier the better. We're saying to you, go and speak with your doctor. Do not diagnose your child. Do not look at the child and say, oh, this child is showing this sign. This child must be bipolar. No. We are not trained to diagnose, not trained at all to diagnose. But there's some key things, there's some key signs that you probably would observe in your child that you need to support them to seek appropriate help. It is really important that we support them to seek the right. It's important for us to support them to seek the right support at the right time. Pastor Fumi, thank you very much for your comment. A lot of people are ashamed to speak out, yes, especially around abuse, especially around childhood trauma. So if a person has experienced rape, for example, when they were young, a lot of people are very ashamed to talk. They don't want to talk about it because it's like, why do people would start to look at me with that eye? I'm transliterating now from Yoruba into English. They will look at me with that eye. They will think, oh, is it not that girl that thing happened to? Oh, is it not that? No. The truth is, when we allow shame to stop us from talking, we deny ourselves the power, or we allow ourselves the power, we allow that event to have power over us. We cannot allow shame to keep us quiet. It is important for us as aunties, as uncles, as daddies, as mummies, as teachers, whatever position you find yourself in the community, to be aware that we have a responsibility to working with our young ones, to making sure that they live a balanced mental health, a balance, that they have a balanced mental health. We have that responsibility to supporting them. Reduce their access, if I can use the word, to social media. What's a 10-year-old child doing on Facebook, on Instagram, or even on YouTube? Why should a 10-year-old child be allowed? Yes, they can have phones because you want to contact them when they go to school, 12 actually, when they go to school, when they're coming back and all of that. We need to realize that the effect of social media is immense in the lives of our young ones, very, very immense. And we have a responsibility to supporting them, to making sure that they do not grow up as damaged adults. We have that responsibility. Thank you so much for those who have tuned in. If I can use the word tuning in. Thank you for me. Kayode, thank you. I appreciate you tuning in. Thank you so much. Olasukomi, thank you for tuning in. Tolani, thank you. And I'm going to be signing off now. Thank you, Nemo. Good night, Nemo. Bye. Bye. Thank you to everyone else that has watched. Thank you.